So John Lamkin, man, it's a wonderful opportunity to get a chance to sit down with you and to chat a little bit about your career in music. We're here in Baltimore, but I want you to take me back to your early days of growing up in Atlantic City.
Wow. Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. I'm glad that you've gotten to me, and it's an honor to be interviewed by you. But yeah, Atlantic City. As a matter of fact, I'm a musician because of Atlantic City. All right, and I'm a music educator because of Atlantic City. My mother was a piano teacher, and my father was a vocalist and a music educator. He was a Q also.
Yeah.
I didn't go that way when I went to college. Right? I'm none fine none. Okay?
I understand.
And so when I became of age, when I say of age, I'm talking about 13, 14 years old. I started playing trumpet when I was maybe in the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade. But I got a chance to hear live jazz music coming from about all of the clubs that were in Atlantic City at the time, and this is in the 1950s, late 50s, early 60s. You see, I'm born in 45, so by 55, I'm 10.
Yeah.
60, I'm 15.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so somewhere along there, 13, 14, 15, I began to hang out, not late, but would go, with friends of mine down to Kentucky Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay, and Arctic Avenue, and down there, and I'd hear this music. As a matter of fact, I heard Jimmy Smith and Lou Donaldson playing at the Wonder Bar.
Wow.
Now they tore the Wonder Bar down and they built another big fabulous club, and they called that the Wonder Garden. And in there, I got a chance to hear Cannonball Adderley with his brother Nat, and in the band with them when they came at that time was Charles Lloyd.
Wow.
And Charles Lloyd was touring with them that way. But I mean, that's what Atlantic City offered me. So when I was about to go into high school, I was with a group of guys in Atlantic City. It was about 5 of us. It was Gordon Adams, Arnold Roberts, Bobby Jackson, Frank Doggett, okay, and those guys, we would get together and listen to jazz music. I'd save my lunch money.
Wow.
And instead of having lunch, I would save my money and then go get an album.
Wow. Now, were you playing at that time?
Yeah, I was playing. Trumpet. I was at that time. I was trying to sit in and play with guys.
Really?
So yeah, I would go to the Black Union, which was right across the street from my church. Now, I'll tell you about my church. Right across the street from my church, on Arctic Avenue. It was right down the street from Illinois Avenue. They call that now Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Yeah.
It's Illinois Avenue.
Yeah.
And so I would go in there with my horn, and the guys would show me stuff, and they would, show me what to play and whatnot. And I was young then. I didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah. Now, who were some of your influences at the time?
Oh, at the time I was listening, of course, I was listening to Miles. But I think my biggest influence at that time was Lee Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lee Morgan came out with well, he didn't come out with it. Jimmy Smith came out with an album called The Sermon.
Yes.
My mother and father realized that I was gravitating to jazz. So they bought The Sermon for me. They bought it on, vinyl, and they bought me a little record player,
Wow.
And that was the first record that they actually bought for me. My mother was very religious, so was my father. I'm not quite as religious as my mom, but and I think they when they saw The Sermon, that sparked interest in them.
Look at that.
Let's get this for him. The Sermon.
Yeah.
Got The Sermon. The Sermon was nothing but a blues, right? I didn't know that then, right? But man, when Lee Morgan started playing, man, I'm like, what is this? You know, and that just really turned me on. I got my horn. I tried to play with Lee Morgan. Man, I couldn't play with Lee Morgan. Saved my life. I kept working, trying to play that solo. And Lou Donaldson was on the record. You know, I could sing the solos back then. You know.
Yeah.
And then there was another friend of mine who lived around the corner. His name was Ed McDonald, and he was a drummer. Ed was older than I am, and so he would be home. He had these two big speakers, you know, and he had his record player right here in the drum set. So he put on a record, and he'd sit down to the record and turn the record up, and he bashed it. I'm like, what? You know? So he's older than I am, and so I'm going over his house listening to him. And then, you know, the guys I mentioned, Gordon and Arnold and Bobby Jackson and those guys and Frank Doggett, we would go over to each other's houses and listen to the records that we had purchased. Okay, now, 13 maybe, 14, you know. And then, you know, I got down to high school, and there were a group of guys who were older than I at the time, and they had a little jazz group, you know.
Yeah.
And so I would, and they you know, embraced me because I was trying to play and probably wasn't playing anything, but I was trying to play, and so, you know, and they would tell me to go out and sit in, so that's what I did. So I found a club. It was called Lou's Bar.
And this is also in Atlantic City.
This is Atlantic City. All this is Atlantic City.
Yeah.
This is all Atlantic City. Lou's Bar was back in an alley behind Illinois Avenue School. And you go to this alley, and there was this bar, and it seemed like the stage was high. There was an organ player in there and a drummer. I don't remember these guys' names at all. I don't even think I knew their names then. But I asked, could I sit in? They said, yeah. So they brought me up, and I sat in and played with them, you know, and played and then went home.
and that's kind of where you develop your confidence.
That's, yeah, you know, because I played with them, and there were other places I'd sit in and play, you know, and they would let me play. And man, it was amazing. And then, you know, you saw everybody. I mean, you had the Club Harlem. Then right across the street you had Grace's Little Belmont. Then right up the street you had the Wonder Garden. Then down the street you had the High Hat and the Silk Hat. You know, and then you had Reggie's Bar, Reggie Edgehill's Bar. And then further in town you had Red Clots, and that was the bar. And all these places had bands in them. And then further down toward Baltic Avenue, Mediterranean Avenue, you had Weeks Bar, you know what I mean? And oh man, I saw Walter Bishop Jr.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that band, and oh man, Billy James was playing drums, you know, and so me and Ed McDonald used to go and sit, you know, in the club because we couldn't buy any drinks or anything.
Right.
We'd sit there and listen. I got a chance to talk to the musicians. And man, that's what started me playing and wanting to play the music, wanting to play jazz. You know what I mean? And then my parents, you know, my father was an educator. My mother taught piano. She wasn't an educator. She didn't graduate from college, but she could play that piano.
Yeah.
She could play. As a matter of fact, I got a picture around here. I just saw it. Where my mom was, it's her obituary, and she's at the organ playing, you know. But once I graduated from high school, you know, I had all this knowledge after having listened to and heard all these musicians around town. As a matter of fact, I saw Duke Ellington just walking down the street.
Yeah.
You know, on Kentucky Avenue, and we'd go to the Steel Pier, and Duke's band was in there. I got a chance to talk to Johnny Coles. I got a chance to talk to Cootie Williams, because Cootie Williams was in the band. Cootie was old then.
Yeah.
And Cootie, it was interesting because, you know, and I didn't know, you know, what's going on, but they would play, and Cootie would be sitting there behind the piano, just sitting there, right? And they had a line of trumpets, about at least four, maybe five trumpet players. Cootie wasn't sitting in the section. Cootie was just sitting on the side. And then, man, all of a sudden, Cootie would get up, man, and pick that horn up, man, and blow the highest, most beautiful hit.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
You know, and I'm thinking, wow, man. And then he put the horn down and sit down.
Yeah.
Behind the piano. You know what I mean?
Now, were you doing any working gigs?
I wasn't doing any working gigs in Atlantic City at the time because I was young.
Yeah.
And they had a union. So you know, in order to work in Atlantic City at that time to work, you had to be part of the union.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you who did work, who was younger than I. Harvey Mason. And Harvey
Yes.
Mason and I used to hang out. We used to hang out on the corner. As a matter of fact, he wrote a tune called KY and the Curb, right? KY and the Curb was on the corner of Arctic Avenue and Kentucky
Avenue.
You know, and
right.
And that curve was right out in front of the Wonder Bar where I saw Jimmy Smith. Well, he was younger than I and stayed in Atlantic City longer than I did.
Yeah.
Because he let me see, I might have been a senior when he was a freshman or something like that, maybe a sophomore. So he did get some gigs in Atlantic City before he went to Berkeley, you know, because he graduated about 2 years after I did. And he stayed around and was able to get some gigs in Atlantic City. My brother got some gigs in Atlantic City because he stayed in Atlantic City longer than I. One of the main gigs I had in Atlantic City was at the Cotton Club. And I played there pretty much the whole summer. It was a good gig because a lot of cats would come through, you know, and sit in and play. And we'd have to play behind the dancers, you know, all that stuff. But what we would do was write our own music and write our own parts, and I could do that.
And you were writing music at that time.
Well, yeah, this was one of the summers that I came home from college.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so I got this gig, and it was at the club. It was at the Cotton Club, and the Cotton Club had begun to decline because Miles had played at the Cotton Club.
Yeah.
In Atlantic City. So, and I tell you, Maury Amsterdam, does that name ring a bell?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he was the MC.
Yeah, Maury Amsterdam was on TV doing,
right.
you know,
he
sort of an MC.
This was like his summer gig.
Yeah.
You know, so he was the MC, and they would bring in all these people, and they would hypnotize, you know, people hypnotize you and whatnot. And then they had the dancers, and so the band was on the side. Everybody had a tune that would be featured on, you know, and I had a tune that I had featured. I don't remember what.
Yeah, those were the sort of the final.
Sunny Gets Blue. That was my tune.
Yeah.
And Sunny Gets Blue.
Oh, okay.
That was my tune. And so yeah, man. And so we had to write all our parts and whatnot. So when I left Atlantic City.
Before you leave Atlantic City, give me a time frame of the final years that you were in Atlantic City, where you began to see the changes in Atlantic City. Because the Atlantic City that you first talked about was this striving, you know, hotbed of music and entertainment.
That's right.
And it was a destination.
All that was in the city. It wasn't on the boardwalk.
Right.
You know,
it was in the city of Atlantic City.
In the city of Atlantic City.
Yes.
You know, now I'm sure that they had balls and all that stuff on the boardwalk, you know, in those big hotels, because they had a lot of big hotels in Atlantic City. As a matter of fact, while I was, you know, still in Atlantic City, I'd worked down in some of those hotels and rooming houses and whatnot.
Right.
So all you had to do, man, summertime, all you had to do was go around and leave your name and address to some of those hotels down there by the boardwalk. And before I would get home, I'd get calls for jobs down there, you know, doing crazy stuff, cleaning up, you know, taking towels up to the rooms and all that stuff, you know. So that was in Atlantic City. So now, all right, so I graduated from high school in 1963. Now, I'm still bustling, okay? Went down to South Carolina, you know, and was really drugged. I told you the story. I was really drugged until I met Skip Pearson, who's an alto saxophone player. And when he comes into the band room, you know, and pulls out that white plastic alto saxophone, I'm like, this is the cat I need to see, because the only white alto saxophone, the plastic alto saxophone that I've seen was the one that was on the shoulder Ornette Coleman on the front of Change of the Century.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But before you go on, I just want to tell everybody we're talking to John Lamkin, and he's telling some fascinating stories about growing up in Atlantic City, and just at a time where Atlantic City was really
Atlantic
a
City was
place
happening, man.
for
Atlantic City was
wonderful entertainment.
Yeah, Atlantic City was happening. We and see then once I graduated, I went down to South Carolina for that freshman year, and I came home. Okay, and that's when I got that gig at the Cotton Club. I went back the next semester, and I came home that summer. But then the next summer, I was working. I was gigging in Atlantic City. In Baltimore, at South Carolina, Orangeburg.
Right.
With Skip Pearson's band. He had a band called the Tetrachords, and my wife was in the band.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so that's how we met. And by the time my senior year comes up in South Carolina State, my wife and I got married. We got married in April, and so I didn't come back home. My parents came to take me home to come to graduation. I graduated, walked across the stage, got my degree and whatnot, and kissed my mom and dad. And they went on back to Atlantic City, and my wife and I, we stayed. And
Incredible.
Now, I said all that to say that I didn't really see the decline that happened in Atlantic City at the time because see, we got married in '67.
Right.
And so I stayed down south that summer, and the next summer I started teaching, And then the summer times I didn't come to Atlantic City that much because I'm gigging.
Right.
And we'd get to Atlantic City, and but I remember coming to Atlantic City, and well, let me back up. I don't remember what year it was, but I remember that they wanted to pass a gambling referendum in Atlantic City. I remember that. My parents were there. And we talked about that, and they said, we are vehemently against it. We don't want gambling in Atlantic City, and we're going to vote it down. They did. That was the first referendum. About 2-3 years later, they brought it back up. And by that time, this is hearsay, I don't know, but I heard that a lot of people began to come to Atlantic City and buy property and live in Atlantic City who were not from Atlantic City. And so when that vote came back around, it was voted in.
Yes.
And that was really the nail, in the coffin as far as the entertainment center in Atlantic City being in
that part of the town.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna end this part 1 of our interview.
Okay.
And then we'll do part 2.
Okay.
In a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. But I just want to say, John Lamkin, it's such a pleasure talking with you, man. And these stories are fascinating, and I'm just so blessed to have the opportunity to spend some time with you, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man.